This presentation is over the Think, Pair, Share as a formative assessment strategy. So what is Think, Pair, Share? Well, it's originally used as an instructional strategy. However, if it's implemented correctly, at the end of assessment, it can be used as a formative assessment. So it can be used with any age group from preschool on up through college. However, when you use it for a formative assessment, you're generally going to use writing as a way to assess, and you would probably need to do that more so in first grade on up. So using Think, Pair, Share, it begins with reflection. So a question is posed, and then a student or the students need to reflect upon it. And they need to think about it, and then they need to write down their thinking. And then they will get into pairs, and the teacher can either set up the pairs or the children can pick partners depending on the teacher. And then they share and they collaborate together and they decide what are the most important parts. And then they share with the whole group. So why do we use Think, Pair, Share? Well, it's a really good way to track student understanding, and if there are any misconceptions, we can dig deeper into that. Another reason is because it provides students with think time that they might not otherwise get, and taking it from that traditional setting and where teachers, normally call on a student in 1 second after they've asked a question and it hasn't provided students with enough adequate time to thoroughly think something through, which then leads us to it improves responses when students have more time to think. And then it's also in a controlled and safe environment. So students are able to explain themselves first in their writing and formulate their ideas, and then they can move to a smaller group with a partner, or you possibly could do larger groups if you were inclined to as the teacher. And then they move to the big group. So they've really formulated their ideas by the time they get to the big group. And it also provides feedback for both the teachers and the students. So the history of it is Professor Frank Lyman and his colleagues at the University of Maryland created this in 1981. And their main concern was with providing students with adequate think time. And over history, over the time since 1981, there's been a lot of variations that have occurred. So we have Write, Pair, Share, which is more so what you would do for a formative assessment. There's Think, Pair, Square, which you do partners and then you get into groups of 4. There's Turn into your neighbor and discuss, so that's just kind of a turn and talk. There's Pair and compare. Timed paired share, where you have a certain amount of time and then you turn and talk to your neighbor and then you share again. And then formulate, share, listen, create. So you formulate your idea, you share it with your partner, you listen to your partner, and then you create a conclusion based off of that together. So developing the strategy, it requires actually a lot of planning. You want to know your outcomes and your standards, and you want your questions aligned to these outcome and standards. So for your test, you're teaching to the test. You want the students to know what they need to know. And using a backwards design is a really good way to do this. Also, using open-ended questions is important, so students have some freedom to go where they want to go with the question and answer it in a way that makes sense to them. However, there should be some parameters so students don't go anywhere with it, and they know what they need to talk about, and they get that done. And then expectations, just setting up expectations like you want all students to participate. Not one person can overwhelm the other one, and so stuff like that. So in the classroom, there's many ways that it can be implemented as a formative assessment. So following a lecture, you could have students fill out a think, pair, share, like the one that you see on the computer here. And they can formulate their ideas, and then they can talk to their partner and then share what they learned. And this could clear up a lot of misconceptions that they had or misunderstandings, and look at it from a different view. Or after an assigned reading, so the students do a reading or the teacher reads to them, and then they, talk about their thoughts of the book and then what their partner thought, and then they share it again. And the final one, which I think is really cool, is during an observation, like a scientific observation. And this one, you just, like high school, they do an observation over bacteria growing on a plate, and they observe this, and then they see what their partner observed, and then they combine those ideas. So it's just more data and more results. And then we go back to it is the think and the reflection and the writing down, and then the collaboration, and then the sharing. So the implementation of this in first grade, I did a language arts one. So when you arrive at home after school, you can tell your parents what you learned in school today and how today about characters and traits. So you ask the student, how will I describe the main character to my parents? And then how my partner did, and then what we decided to share with the class. So they're coming up with what's the most important traits of this character, and they're coming up with descriptive words. In fourth grade, there's social studies, and this one, I really like this think, pair, share. It's a super think, pair, share. So they do all the same, what I think, what my partner thinks, what we decide to share together. But in this one, they also use the best of other shares, so other students in the classroom and what they shared, and then their overall conclusion with all of the data. So I did this on a fourth grade social studies, and what was the most important part you learned about mountain men today. So then you can clear up misconceptions and understand where the students are at with it. And then high school, a science class, this one is the observation one I was talking about. So the idea is to observe the cells in different stages of mitosis under a microscope, and then write down your observations, share with your partner, and finally decide what's important to share with the class. And then you come up with your conclusions. So you have so much more data to work off of. So with results, you could do, as a teacher, you could do a 3-point system where each column is a point, or they have a certain scale of, well, they use punctuation and periods, and you could assess writing and such in that as well. Or I am more inclined to use it as an informal assessment with no score at all. And then providing feedback, you can provide written feedback on their form, their think, pair, share form that they turned in. Also oral feedback during whole group when students are presenting their ideas, because then you can hit misconceptions right away. And then addressing the whole entire class if you see a continuum of things that are looking like they're struggling with. So in conclusion, it provides the teacher and students with feedback. It guides teaching, so teachers know where to go with their instruction as a formative assessment. It can be in any grade. It provides the students a think time, which is what the creator was really thought that was important. It improves responses because of that think time, and it's in a controlled and safe environment.